Our guest tonight is kind of an interesting guest because this concept of abduction and contactees really kind of began in the 50s.
Yes, it did.
And you always have to wonder, has this been forever ongoing, or is this kind of a new thing with humanity? And we've got paintings of UFOs and some medieval stuff, and there's Sitchin's works takes the UFO and the Nephilim back many millennia. But this episode of Contact is a little more recent.
This is definitely more recent, and let's let Joe take it. Let him introduce the guest.
There's a lot of people that are versed in the UFO history know that contact with flying saucers and things of the like really began in the mid-1940s. Much of it wasn't really recorded or discovered until many years later, but traditionally it began in the early 1950s. And predominantly it began with a group of people, George Van Tassel of the Integratron fame, a whole host of scientists and people from all over, of all calibers, and it really took off for the first time when Reverend Robert Short and George Van Tassel met out at Giant Rock, and Van Tassel had just begun publicly talking about his experiences with telepathic contact and things of this, and the end result was an entire subculture movement across the United States in which the public took these matters into their own hands and dispelled that whole taboo that these things shouldn't be publicly discussed or examined or scientifically examined and all this. And so everything that we do now is pretty much attributed to this movement that our guest tonight, Robert Short, was assigned to when he ran into George Van Tassel.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight, Reverend Bob Short.
Yeah. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing okay.
Hey,
so, Barbara.
Robert.
Hey, Barbara.
I'm here.
Happy anniversary, honey.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. And I hope Scott is immensely successful. I really do.
Well, it's an adventure, and I think that's what life is full of.
Yep.
So it's like, away we go.
So, okay, let's go back to the beginnings of all this. Your first contacts and how you were led to Giant Rock and the home of George Van Tassel.
Originally I made contact. I was a good friend of George Hunt Williamson. They called him Rick. Okay, and through Rick Williamson, I was more or less put in touch with, I guess you would call, space sources, and became an experiencer of such sources back in the 50s, okay? I'm not going to say okay too many times, but anyway.
50s, you don't look that old.
But anyway, so I began to get contact with these space sources back in the early 1950s, 1951 to be exact, and gradually through their communications with me, they said, if you wish to learn more about us, go to the Big Rock in the desert. Now, at the time, I was living in San Fernando Valley, and I said, well, okay, if you're telling me this, where is this? And no answer would come. And every time I would ask them, there wouldn't be any answer forthcoming. And I wondered why. And I kept asking, and nothing would come. And I even asked them who these sources were, that they were obviously extraterrestrial, but I wanted a name. And finally, this gentleman said, my name is Jonal, Jon-Al. And I said, okay, fine. And what people do you represent? Where are you from? And he said, you will discover that later. And I said, well, all right. So anyway, they wouldn't give me the address of how to find this place in the desert, just the Big Rock. In the meanwhile, my mother, working in a restaurant out there, met a lady by the name of Nora Helms, who'd been out to this place, out to this rock, and had talked to a gentleman underneath the rock, or while she was there, that contacted space individuals, or space intelligence, as we call them, whose name was Solganda, back in 1953. And so anyway, by this time, it turns out that the lady's named Nora Helms happened to be James Cagney's personal secretary. And also about the same time, through ham radio contacts that I was in on with Rick Williamson, that's how I got into this, in Winslow, Arizona, to a man by the name of Lyman Streeter, who had a ham shack on his personal property where his home was. And at first he thought he had his leg pulled by these voices speaking to him over his ham equipment, and, of course, with no call letters. And at first he thought, like I said, he was having his leg pulled by some other ham operator. And it turned out that the townspeople started asking him what these strange things were that were flying around over the town and over his property. And he said, I couldn't tell them. I wouldn't dare tell them that. If I did, I'd lose my job out here as key telegraph operator for Santa Fe Railroad. And through this, I would consequently lose everything I've got. So he said, your guess is as good as mine. So anyway, he did know. But anyway, he discovered that this wasn't a joke. And when he would start to ask him a question that he had in his mind, when he turned the receiver on, the answer would immediately come. And so he began to discover something very strange, that apparently they were reading his mind. And it just blew him away. But anyway, through these contacts, we were told about the coming of the Greys from a small area out in Orion's Belt, that evidently they destroyed their area by the use of some destructive device. And they found this trade routes to our Earth coming to our planet long, long ago, and that's how they found us. And then also, gradually, we also asked them about their medical, do they have, when they become injured, do they have medical facilities? They said, no. We asked, what do you mean? You mean you don't have any way to repair your injuries? He said, we don't need any. No, we're able to do this.
All right, Reverend Short, we're going to hit a break here. So these guys were showing up and talking to you, kind of warning of the Greys coming, and I want to pick that up when we come right back after the break.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to America Now, and our guest tonight is the Reverend Robert Short. And when we left off, Robert, we were talking about your contacts and that you were being warned about the Greys. And if
the coming of the Greys, the big eyes, we were told that they had to destroy an area where they originally lived or where they originally resided, and they had to go somewhere to continue to breed or continue to hybrid. And they saw that they evidently consulted their star chart maps and discovered that there was trade routes to this particular part of the galaxy, of our galaxy, and that they started investigating us and found that, unfortunately, I have to say this, that we are very low on the intelligence scale, and that we are very, accessible, more or less, put it that way. And so they decided that they would come in on us and see what we were all about. And it's gone on from that. And so people have had both benevolent and these other types. Okay, now there's been a lot of unfortunate situations that people have stated on record that they have undergone with these so-called Greys, such as plantation of some kind of devices within their folds of skin and so on. Dr. Roger Lair has had quite the experiences with that sort of thing, as you no doubt know. And but anyway, so they have continued to evidently, as I said, crossbreed here, as we have come to understand to some degree. Whether or no we want to believe it or not, that's another thing. But also underground installations and so on that we've heard so much about.
So did the Greys just arrive here in the 50s, or have they had a longer presence here, and we were just made aware of their presence when they started contacting you and your group? Okay.
That could be, but we don't really know how long they've been here, really. I mean, we really don't. We have no idea of how long they've really been here. Okay. Because if they have gone underground, or if they have gone into what they call submersion, and also now they have had, I understand that they have had the benevolent ones have been also under attack at times and have had to defend themselves. And people have, some people have seen this, they claim, of raised